Hello everyone, and welcome back to Todos Santos. So I want to give you a little view here of the area we've been working on over the last 5 episodes, I believe. And today, we're going to finish it. We're beginning with this very important road that we laid down all the way back in episode number 33. And finally, I'm going to be going in with the intersection marking tool and making it look nice and functional. Now, I always wanted this area to be pedestrian and bike friendly with some transit built in. So what I'm doing is I'm using this road from the workshop that has a one-way bike lane separated via a painted median from a bus lane, and then 1 lane of traffic. So basically what I have to do here is go through and fill in all these gaps where we have intersections and actually color the bus lanes because the original road did not have bus lanes built in. That's just something that I chose to make myself. So we're going to be using the intersection marking tool, like I said, and also Traffic Manager to make sure that only buses can use that. So at this point, I had been using the intersection marking tool for quite a while, and I'd pretty much figured out its features. Of course, it's always being updated. It's still being updated to this day with plenty of new features. But as of this point, I had never actually used it to make a big project like this. I just used it for individual intersections and that kind of thing. So I'm still learning a little bit. For example, I learned there that if you put down a line after you have a filler down, you have to delete the filler. Maybe I'm missing something there. So I learned the hard way that you have to make the lines first and then put the filler in. Basically what I'm doing is putting fillers in for the bike lane and trying to match that up with the green color of the bike lane, which is built into the road. And then I'm doing the same thing with the bus lanes, just with that nice dark red color. And then in between, in the median, I'm just doing a stripe filler and just making sure the angle matches up as best I can. You're not always going to be able to get the angle of lines like that to match up, but you can get it close enough so that it's going to blend in and not stand out. Now, where there are intersections where cars have to be able to turn, I have dashed lines to indicate that they can cross over the bus lane, or if it's a turning lane to turn right, then it's dashed to show that they can go into the bus lane in order to make that turn at the intersection. But other than that, there are solid lines on the outside of the bus lanes to indicate that cars are not allowed. And then of course later, once we're done with all this decoration, I'm going to come back through and do a Traffic Manager President Edition pass and ban cars and most other vehicles from the bus lanes themselves. Of course, I have to leave it so that emergency vehicles and service vehicles and commercial vehicles can use it so that they can actually access the buildings. I believe if I ban them from those lanes, they would not be able to get to the buildings on the side of the road, which would not be good. But that's just a minor exception, and I think it's just pretty cool to see the cars, for the most part, avoiding the bus lanes. I have a little bit of trouble continuing this pattern where the 2 one-way roads converge onto the 2-way road here, just because it's such a long, sweeping node here. The lines end up looking a little bit weird, so I end up having to not add in the bike lane color there. But that's a pretty minor exception, and for the most part, we're able to carry this pattern all the way through. We're going to get back to these guys in just a minute. I'm just going to speed through the rest of this because it's pretty much all the same, but I just kind of wanted to show you the scale of this project where it seemed pretty intimidating at first. It's a little repetitive, a little bit of a grind, but it really was not that bad to go through, and it's kind of satisfying to see it all come together here. Now, of course, I didn't want to just leave it at painting various colors on the ground, so I had to add some bike lane signs in here. Quite a few of those, just putting them fairly regularly so that people understand not to drive in the bike lane. Same thing with the bus lanes here, just putting down some only bus markers. I talked about that back when I made the HOV lane system, I think back in like episode 22 or 21 or something like that. Just the ordering of the words always makes me chuckle when I see that. And I remember getting really excited when I was putting down these decals because I started seeing the buses using the bus lanes. It's just kind of cool to see them going down their dedicated lane. Okay, so now we have all these people waiting at this bus stop, and that's a little concerning. I looked into how many people were trying to use this one bus line that goes from this whole big area over to the island, which I think I mentioned last episode, and it's just ridiculous. So I need some sort of solution that is not buses, because I don't think I would be able to have enough buses running to actually carry all these people. Now, I mentioned before that I want to keep the infrastructure projects in Todos Santos a little low-key, but I also don't want to hamstring myself in terms of being able to have fun with transit. So what I do here is I do pretty much the most expensive and high-key infrastructure project I could think of, which is a sunken metro or a subway. Maybe it's a little unrealistic to have this short of a metro line, but it does serve a very important purpose, which is to carry all these people, both citizens and tourists, from this main tourist area over to the island, which is such an important tourist destination with the old town and the castle and, also plenty of businesses and offices as well. So we have 3 metro stops. One of them is right in the heart of this area. One of them's over at the eastern end, where we're going to have a bit of a secondary transit hub at some point in the future. I haven't built that yet. And then we also have one over on the island. Now, I tried light rail, I had tried monorails, I had tried buses, but we ended up settling on this metro line, and I'm pretty happy with it. What we're going to focus on next is the central transit station, where we're going to connect the metro to our bus lines. I had this central block earmarked for some sort of park or something, but what I end up doing is figuring that, if they have all this infrastructure built here, they have a metro line, they have buses, they're going to need some sort of transit station to service all the people who are going to be using these transit services. Now, you might have seen there I had a little bit of a glitch with the road networks there, where the nodes were basically disappearing and the normal grass texture was poking through. I'm not sure what happened there. It seemed to be temporary because I haven't had that issue since working in this area. So I'm not too worried about that at the moment. It was a little concerning. I've mentioned this before, but anytime there's an issue with networks in this game, I just get a little freaked out that it's going to affect my save negatively in some way. But like I said, thankfully, that has not happened yet. So I start with this building. I think it's just a vanilla commercial building or maybe an office building. I just thought it had the right generic look, and I just wanted to connect it up with that other main block there where we have the big skyscraper via a couple of pedestrian elevators with an overpass. And that building would just be where you could go to buy bus passes or to wait for a bus or a metro line or do some other transit-related task. Now, here's what I talked about last episode, where we're connecting this bus line that runs north to south through this whole area, and we're connecting it over closer to the downtown, running across this main road here. I figured they would want some sort of transit connection to the southern tip of downtown because we do have the light rail that runs over to this area, which comes right from the center of downtown and also eventually covers the north end of downtown. So we're really going to get full coverage and people are going to be able to access this area from downtown quite easily. And then I'm just doing the usual thing where I come through and add these pre-made bus stop assets that I made in the asset editor, which again, just adds some nice detail. And it's almost this nice little ritual I have. Every time I make a bus line, I can just go and put these down. It's a pretty easy task, but you can squeeze a lot of detail out of it. Plus, it's just sort of satisfying to see your bus lines come to life with that sort of detail. And this is something I just thought of, but it also kind of forces you to put your bus stops in logical places. So if you think you're going to actually have to put down a building right next to your bus stop, you realize there's going to have to be space for the bus stop. It's going to have to make sense that they would actually put a bus stop here. Now I have this very strange glitch here with the sharpen corners function in Node Controller, which I've talked about before. So I end up just doing the usual thing and deleting the parking lot I was trying to be fancy with, and I just put down a more traditional parking lot road parking lot. I have actually tried to stop doing that sharpen corners thing when I'm using the parking lot roads because it seems to glitch out a lot, so I just don't do that anymore. Anyway, I just wanted a little bit of a parking lot here. I assume that would be like for employees who work at this building or who work on the metro line. But in addition to car parking, we also have a little bit of bike parking here. With all these bike lanes, people would need places to keep their bikes in a safe location. And what better place than right next to a metro station and bus stop? I think if I wanted to be a bit more efficient with my build here, I would probably do like what I did with the bus stops and just go into the asset editor and make up some pre-made bike racks like this with all the bikes in them. But unfortunately, it's a little annoying to use the asset editor, especially when you have lots of mods and assets. So I'm just going to give in to my laziness here and not do that. And what I end up doing in later episodes when I need bike parking is I just come back here and copy and paste some of these bike racks with the bikes in them. Now, continuing the theme that I want this place to be friendly to pedestrians and bikers, I wanted to beautify it just a little bit with some nice flowers and grasses and trees, and of course these lily pillies that I have been putting all over the city. So just doing some very basic planter work with some hedges and walls, and just trying to really make shapes with these planters that fill in the gaps in a sensible way. Basketball courts, finally. I remembered to install some. Obviously, this is a lot better than just making them myself because they're a lot more detailed, and especially for a park like this, I wanted it to look like a well-maintained city park where you could go and do sports or just hang out or whatever. So I want them to look nice and maintained, which these do. At this point, I realized that this vanilla Metro asset did not look like it really fit here, so I wanted to remove its props with the mod BOB. And I'm just covering it up with some ploppable pavement so that it blends in a little bit more to the environment, and it's going to look a little bit nicer when we put in these details. Just adding some walls to separate it from the sidewalk, because this is going to be a very busy area. I just wanted to separate it a little bit from the main throughway there. And then of course, it's a little gray, so I wanted to add some bushes and palm trees and seating. And then we have a couple ticket machines there and a little map so all our Sims can figure out where this very short metro line goes to. Okay, as I put the finishing touches on this little metro station entrance, I just want to tell you about where this video is going to go. So later on, we're going to build the city's main baseball stadium, which is going to be a lot of fun. Quite a detailed build, so I'm looking forward to that. And then at various points, we're going to work toward addressing the elephant in the room, which is all the gaps that are remaining in this area. So we're going to do a couple sessions of filling those in quickly. For example, right now, I'm going to give you a little bit of context to this area so that the transit station doesn't look so lonely. So I just did the barest of detailings. It may look familiar to those of you who watched episode number 36. We did a bit of development like that, except I just couldn't put as much care into it because I have to do dozens and dozens of these blocks, and at the time of building, I did not want to go crazy. And I am happy to report back that I did not exactly go crazy. Maybe a little bit, I don't know. Okay, so now there's this little bit of space left for the park, and this is probably the weakest point of this build, I think. I wanted to make it look like it's a very well-used park where people not only go there to hang out on the grass here, but they also form some desire paths here to cross from one area to the other. It just doesn't look that good, I think. I tried to use Surface Painter to get these skinny little paths, which is kind of notoriously hard to do because it has a fairly blocky resolution, if that makes any sense. And then I tried to cover that fact up by using dirt decals, which just didn't really do the job, but I wasn't really sure how else to do it. So I'm just going to leave it as it is. I think it serves well enough. And I'm just trying to not get too hung up on details like this, because if I do, and I have mentioned this quite a few times in this series already, I know that I'm just not going to be able to finish it. So now instead of doing one big lighting pass at the end of this video, because we're doing so many disparate places, I just wanted to do the lighting as we go. So here I just wanted to make sure that the main paths were well lit with these very cool and very modern looking lamps, whereas the park itself, the grass portion of it, is not lit up because they didn't want to ruin that with lighting. They just wanted it to be nice and natural and grassy. I'm also doing the classic technique of using drain decals to transition between various types of pavement. This just gives it a little bit of a border. And then I'm just giving this whole area one last little look-see, and I realized that I have not put nearly enough trees down. So I take some of these trees and hedges and just make it a little bit more green and a little bit more pleasant, I imagine, to be around. So I did the sort of development that I showed in that little before and after segment over quite a bit of this area. Obviously, there's still a lot of gaps to fill in, but this area next to the shoreline between this main road with the bike lanes and bus lanes is pretty much filled in. So I want to go through and do some lighting. Now in episode 33, I talked about the way I want to have the road network set up and the way I want to light it. If you want to hear about what my thought process is for this, I recommend you go check out that video, check out the lighting section, where I more thoroughly explain what I'm thinking. But basically, I just want to have some of the roads be lit up and some of them not. And because this is such a well-populated, well-visited area, I wanted to err on the side of lighting up too much rather than too little. I also think these buildings are a little bit too bright with their built-in lights, so I take those off. And I think it ends up looking a little bit nicer. So now that we've lit this up, let's play baseball. I had this interestingly shaped block here across from the mall. I had been considering for quite a while what I wanted to do here. And then I stumbled across this very cool stadium asset on the workshop that's a little bit modular. It has these little stands that you can add in. So I decided to go with that. Now the city already has a very big stadium in the downtown, and it has a soccer field built in. I imagine that they could probably use that for baseball and, just refit the field as a baseball diamond if it's the right size. But I just thought that we should have an actual dedicated baseball stadium here, and they would have some sort of team in some sort of league. I really have no kind of lore set up about that. But basically, there would be a professional baseball team in Todos Santos. If you have any suggestions for their name or mascot or history or that kind of thing, please do let me know in the comments. I think it would be fun to have some background there. Now, getting back to the actual build, it's probably a little bit too cramped for an actual baseball stadium. I don't think the home runs that people hit here would be very impressive because there's just not that much space to cover. But I'm going to suspend my disbelief for a while and just continue with the build. I wanted to fill it with advertisement because that's just something you get with professional sports. Lots and lots of ads everywhere. So we have these little banner ads on the sides. The wall there was the perfect height to fit these in. And so they have advertisement here for the people who are, walking into the stadium or driving by or hanging out outside the stadium. And then there are a couple big billboards for all the people sitting in the stands to look at whenever the game gets boring. For some reason, I didn't want these spaces down here to be empty, so I am just covering them up with fences. And I imagine this is where, the teams would come in. Instead of through the main entrance, they would come in through the sides to get to the dugouts, which, by the way, we're going to be building in a little bit. We're going to be doing some custom dugouts and other modifications to the field just to make it fit a little bit better. Fences don't exactly fit in perfectly, so I kind of have to overlap them, which is always a little annoying, but I'm not going to worry about that too much. So the asset as it is uses pedestrian paths built in to stand in as the diamond, which is pretty clever, but it wasn't quite the look that I was going for. So for that reason, I end up setting myself what ends up being a very, very annoying challenge, which is making the actual diamond out of these little dirt planter pieces, which I sink into the ground just to get a little bit more precise of a shape that looks a little bit more true to life in terms of the shape of a baseball diamond. Especially, if you're going to have a professional team here, you're going to want a nice stadium to make a good impression on all the away teams that are going to come visiting. You don't want them to give the impression that you cheap out on your field. Of course, it can't be so simple as just putting down a few props. The land here, for some reason, just does not want to stay flat and cooperate with me. So I end up having to use these big grass terraforming networks to flatten everything out, at least in the vicinity of the actual diamond there. And then what I end up doing is covering up any gaps here that are away from these props with some ploppable grass. It's not exactly the most elegant method, but it ends up working, and it makes sure that the environment around these dirt planter props here is nice and consistent. So anything else I do in the area is not going to mess that up because it's all set in stone, so to speak, with these grass terraforming networks. So I'm now in the mode of putting down a bunch of networks and stuff. So I decide to use the edge of the grass terraforming networks here, and I sink down a couple of dirt roads to make the dugouts. I use these construction fences because they have this green cover on one side, which sort of looks like when I think of a dugout, I think of like it has like green foam, I guess, on the outside. Maybe I'm going crazy there. Maybe I'm remembering incorrectly, but that's basically the look I'm going for with the dugouts. And then I just use these very simple steps here so that the players can just step up to the plate. Watching this now, I realize I probably should have covered the dugouts so fans of the opposing team couldn't accidentally spill their beers on the players, but it's a little too late for that. And, our baseball players in Todos Santos have thick skin, so they're not too worried about that. And then I'm using these colored benches just to show that they're two different teams. Not sure which one is home and which one is away, but I suppose it doesn't really matter. So I felt like I needed a main entrance to this area, so I just clipped this kind of random residential building in because I think it has a cool look. And of course, it was also the right size, which is important as well. Now, I wanted to connect the boardwalk that we made in episode number 35 across this road over to the stadium, because we're going to have a little bit of a pedestrian area next to the stadium. But I didn't just want to do a surface level crosswalk because this is a wide road, and that would not be very pleasant to cross, even if you had some sort of pedestrian light there. So I just copy and paste this crossing from somewhere else in the city. I like the green color. I think just really fits the theme of the city with all these trees and green fences that I like to put everywhere. It just seems to fit in with the infrastructure. And I've shown you this before. Making an invisible crossing here, you just use the normal pedestrian path so that you can put it in the right place, and then you just upgrade it to an invisible one. Now, I didn't want to put a giant parking lot next to this stadium. I just felt like I wanted it to be a little bit more pedestrian friendly, a little bit less car centric. But of course, we need some parking for employees, and there's some handicap parking as well. So I just put that up against the edge of this hill here. I put down those retaining walls off screen because you've seen me put those down so often. There's nothing really special to see, so I just cut that footage out. Then we have, like I said, some handicap parking, and the rest will be for employees, that sort of thing. And I'm just trying to generally decorate this area and make it look pleasing. We're going to take this theme of brick wall and lots of grass and greenery around this whole area. And I'm just stamping this area with some pavement to make it look more like a cohesive lot where they would have actually paved it over instead of just having kind of these random splotches of concrete. Not a very good look. It just makes it look a little bit more consistent. I also realized that the door here probably isn't enough to handle lots of fans coming in, so I add these little doors. They're a little high up. I sink them off screen so that they actually meet up with the ground instead of floating there. And then I just want to delineate the driving area from the pedestrian area with good old bollards. And I make liberal use of those just to make the area look a little bit cooler and just to separate that pavement up a little bit more. I was a little awkward with these little spaces here. Obviously the baseball diamond has a curved end, so we have these little triangles. I just kind of fence them off with these walls, using the same assets as I do everywhere else. And because that's a pretty useless green area in terms of, they're not going to need to maintain it, so there's some overgrown grass there next to the billboard. All right, while I work on this pedestrian area that's outside of the baseball stadium, I'm going to play a little music, and I'm going to stop talking. And I'll see you in a second. Now, I promised last episode that I was going to finish this whole area we've been working on this episode, and I am. So while I light this place up, I just want to talk a little bit about this project. It's taken 6 episodes, including this one, to get all the way through this big area. It took a total of about 32 hours of footage to make this entire area, sped up and cut down to about 4 hours of episodes. So it was a lot of work, but I think it really helped me take the city in a new direction, and we're going to be continuing on that direction over the next many episodes, hopefully at least, of Todos Santos. But at this point during the build, I just wanted to finish it, and I wanted to have it be quality, but I didn't want to sink hours and hours into finishing this last area of gaps. So before we get to that, I'm just going to finish up the bus stops. I'm adding another north-south bus line here that covers the eastern edge. This is the area we made in episode 33 and 34. This bus line eventually is going to connect up to the southern edge of town, but that's a tale for another day. So how are we going to fill all this in? That's a very good question. And instead of telling you, I hope you don't mind if I take the liberty of showing you. For better or for worse, we are done with this area. I have to say, I'm pretty proud of this. It's added a huge, dense area to the city, which I hadn't really imagined that it would come out this way. When I started on this area, I thought it would be less dense. I thought it wouldn't be as impactful on the skyline and on the silhouette of the city, but it's almost a little more eye-catching than the downtown now, and I think it's nice. There is a little bit of a gap between this area and the downtown, where there are no skyscrapers or high-rises of any kind. I might come back and adjust that later, but for now, thank you so much for watching. As always, I really appreciate your time, and I can't wait to see you on the next one. Oh, and by the way, these cinematics are my favorite of the series so far. They show a bit more of this place in context and wide shots. I hope you enjoy.